respects, I suppose focusing on the politics of what we're doing is just an easy thing for you to do. But I would ask you today, just for today, to look through the other end of the telescope, to think about what we're going to talk about today in terms of improving the state of Ohio, being in a position of minimizing politics in our state, and beginning to do things that have either been left undone or things that are critical that we are able to achieve. You know, in our administration, I think the reason we have been able to accomplish so much, and I really want to downplay the I in all this for this reason, it's a team that I've been able to assemble. And I believe the reason why virtually all of them, maybe not all of them, you never know what everybody's thinking, the reason why they've worked so hard and been so diligent is because it's not about politics. It's really about policy and bringing great change to the state of Ohio and getting ourselves in a strong position. And I learned early on in my career, even as a state senator, and then most particularly when I went to Congress, that if you spend your time thinking about who your friends are, what political considerations there are, you will leave that office with great regret, because you will have left undone things that you knew were important. And I've been in and I've been out, and I can tell you, if you remember who your friends are when you go in, you're certainly going to know who your friends are when you go out. And then you go back in again, and it's pretty interesting. I probably was invited to my last year in Congress, 30 or 40 Christmas parties. And then the 10 years I was out, I averaged about 2 parties a year that I was invited to, one that I invited myself to. And now I'm back up to 40 parties again. You just can't be a public official or a public figure if you are worrying about making friends or what are the political ramifications that take away from the most important things that you need to do. I've been reading 2 really important books lately. One about a 450-pager that I'd recommend to everybody on the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a martyr. He gave his life. Nazis executed him in the closing days of the war. Some say he was actually personally ordered executed by Hitler, carried out by Himmler. Dietrich Bonhoeffer fought him with every bit of strength and energy he had. Could you imagine that? This man was living in New York City and said, I cannot go back and be part of healing the German church and the German people if I don't suffer what they are suffering now. All we got to do is get a couple bad headlines. Who cares? I'm just finishing a book by William Wilberforce, a terrific book. Wilberforce was a man that fought the slave trade in Great Britain. He fought the horrific activities that were going on in India, where they executed actually the wives of people who died. They would put them in a fire and burn them to death, and people would cheer. And these stories are unbelievable. Wilberforce spent almost all of his life fighting the slave trade and just lost year after year after year. But at the end of the day, the slave trade was eliminated. He even fought just reading last night, he even fought the original peace agreement between the French and the rest of the world when Napoleon was defeated the first time, and objected to the peace treaty because the French had not agreed to abolish slavery. You read stories like that. Oh, and one of my great heroes, I've never even talked about this guy before, Václav Havel. I got a chance to meet Václav Havel. He wrote a book called The Art of the Impossible. And Václav Havel in his book wrote about the fact that why don't we just do the right thing as human beings? And it's a fabulous book. I'd commend it to anybody that thinks about public service. And then I had a chance to meet Václav Havel. Dick Armey and I was talking to him about that new album, OK Computer, and a little bit about Lou Reed. Because, you know, he was kind of a rock and roll guy and a poet. Went to prison, by the way, fought the communists in Czechoslovakia. He became the president of the Czech Republic. He just died over the weekend. What courage, right? So I want you all to know that I know there's, you know, you look at this business and you think politics. We really try to keep politics to an absolute minimum. And as my friend Bob Blair always says, he says, you know, John, I tell them, they just don't get it if they think you're going to be afraid to make a tough decision. So anyway, enough of all that preaching. If you hadn't gone to church yesterday, consider that part of your attendance. Is that okay, Ted? And I want all of you to know, of course, my single greatest benefit that I have received since I have been governor of Ohio is a greatly strengthened personal faith. Faith in the Lord. That's what drives me. It's what sustains me. It's what gives me so much joy as we work together to improve our state. Let's just go back for a few moments and talk about where we were. And I know that Joe was on the road with me and he heard this a lot of times, but I just think that for all of us in this room who have witnessed this level of change over this last year, I don't think anybody's seen anything like it. I'm not sure that we're ever going to see anything like it in the future because it is really amazing. Remember that we had lost 400,000 jobs over the last 4 years, 600,000 jobs over the last 10 years. Only Michigan and California had done worse than Ohio. And when I came here in 1970, Ohio truly was the promised land. And when I stop and I think about the fact that we were being devastated, in fact, I think we were on death's doorstep. The loss of all these jobs, the rise in poverty in the state, our population growth was anemic. We lost 2 congressmen. Our credit rating was headed south. Tim Keene will tell you we were on the edge of getting a downgrade with our credit. 1/3 of our young people were leaving the state after they graduated from college after 3 years, still a challenge that we have, but they were leaving because the opportunity wasn't in Ohio. They were going other places, whether it was the Triangle in North Carolina or Austin, Texas. It just is like a magnet down there to young people. We were in very bad shape. And then I come into office and I inherit this $8 billion deficit. Now, there is not one member of the press that thought that that $8 billion budget deficit could be eliminated without a tax increase or without devastating poor people. There was not one person in this state that thought that. In fact, I know that there were certain members of my family that didn't think we could do it. But I kind of knew it because I'd spent 10 years of my life in Washington building a team of which Wayne Struble was such a crucial part. And we had spent time looking at this state. And what we were able to conclude is basically political considerations or an unwillingness to face the music had put Ohio in this deep, deep hole. And that if we could just get ourselves in a position of where we would throw the politics out and just enact good policy, we were convinced that we could get this done. And I have to tell you, 2 or 3 years ago, Wayne and I sat down along with Ben Kasich, and we kind of outlined what we needed to do. And Bob, you were there, and Jerry Ray was there. And when you think back, and Tim Keene came in from the inside, but we brought him to the outside. When you think back about those original documents we prepared, Tim, it's amazing how many of those actions that we took were related to that document 2 or 3 years ago. Greg Moody being another participant who we were so lucky to get. CEO Magazine ranked Ohio the 44th worst state for business. The Tax Foundation ranked us 47th. So we've now stabilized the patient in this state. And the way I like to talk about it is that we now have eliminated the credibility problem that we had in this state. Our credit rating improved. I like to say that when S&P downgraded the United States of America, they improved Ohio's credit rating. That makes them my favorite credit rating agency. Fitch just about 2 weeks ago reaffirmed the fact that Ohio is now stable and solid. one-time money or gimmicks or smoke and mirrors, just not in this proposal. Secondly, we just got new numbers. We as a state, where we were either providing tax credits or whether we were improving infrastructure or doing workforce training grants, have been directly involved in either creating or saving 83,000 jobs. We are now 8th in the nation in job creation. 8th in the nation in job creation. Certainly got 7 spots to go, gang. We better work harder. And we're #1 in the Midwest. We are #1 in the Midwest. And the reason why I feel so good about Ohio is because we have scale. We have size. We have diversity. And diversity in terms of the advantages that we have. And we were really a sleeping giant. Maybe even in some respects a dying giant. But because of our diversity and our size and our scale and our assets and our ability to solve these challenges, we're now alive and becoming more and more vigorous. Hey, how about the unemployment? I mean, it went from 9% to 8.5%. These numbers will move around. I'm not going to tell you this has all happened because we're here, but I got to tell you, if the numbers went up, you'd be whacking me, so why don't we take a little bit of credit for the fact that this is the single biggest drop in the unemployment numbers in 28 years. Now, these are facts, Darrell. These aren't made-up things. These are facts. And CNBC says between 2010 and 2011, listen to this one, Ohio has gone from 29th to 5th in the cost of doing business, jumped 10 spots in fiscal health, and improved 11 spots in overall business environment, 34th to 23rd. So you see we have a lot to do. Why is this happening? Well, it's happening because of certainty. The one thing that people don't understand sometimes is that when there is uncertainty in an environment, businesses will run for the hills. And when businesses feel a sense of certainty and comfort, that's when they're willing to make investments. And let me just give you a couple examples. You go live in Connecticut, God only knows what's going to happen to you next week. The state of Illinois had to have a legislative approval of a tax credit on a one-off basis to keep Sears over there. Now, we didn't get Sears, but we sure got everybody's attention, including the legislature and the governor of Illinois and the site selectors who look around. California, another big increase in taxes on the top rate, increase in the sales tax. Go back to Illinois for a second. How would you like to have their overhangs over there? The fact that they don't know how to deal with their pensions, they still don't know what to do with their budget deficit. I read New York just raised taxes. New York raised taxes the other day. How do you think companies feel over there? Now you got AmTrust moving 800 jobs to Columbus, right? Out of New York City. Stability, certainty. We're not going to turn around and raise their taxes or beat them over the head or over-regulate them. We're just not going to do that, and they know it. And, of course, the most important growth that we could possibly have, the growth in jobs inside the state of Ohio.